you guys. How are you doing today?
Good.
Great. Let's start with celebrations. I noticed that on Monday when I was in your Zoom meeting, I noticed that 90% of you guys were using your anchor charts. Wonderful. Also, sections 5A and 5B and 5C had 100% accuracy on their DOL.
That's awesome.
Awesome, you guys. Okay, let's get started. Today, we will start with the genre informational text and persuasive. Okay? Thank you for coming to the PLC with your no-show chart prepared. Please share out what you have for your no-show chart, please.
What do you see? Since you have your no-show charts, let's look and see in this document, highlight anything in here that you have not included on yours. Okay, and so let's talk about why we think these highlights may have been included.
So for me, I highlighted counter argument or counterclaim and conclusion call to action. I did identify the claim, but I didn't think about introducing the counterclaim or the counter argument to the students, just because maybe the wording. And also, once I saw it, I did think about how in the text it does have a counter argument, and the kids may point out that why is the author saying something against what they're claiming.
Right, because you want to think about in that text, there is a section where if we're wanting the students to understand that each paragraph supports the central idea, this one seems to go off a little bit. And so the students may not be able to understand, well, why is he talking about failures if he wants the government to support it? So we want to then introduce that the author has presented a counter argument or a counterclaim to help support. It actually does support or strengthen his argument. So that's put there because even though that's not necessarily something that we would normally look at, it's in this particular text. So we want them to be able to see it to understand how it supports the central idea.
For me, it was the sections of the text to support the author's purpose.
Yeah, and how do you think, or why do you think that's important for them to understand the sections of the text?
So we can, knowing the teak, we can have the author's craft and knowing why is it that this passage is here, this section is here. Like you were talking about failures. Well, even though it's, we want money for the inventors, but then they have failures. So, but why is it that the author included that section?
Right. So as we go through that particular day, we know that we want to really look at the text structure and how it's written so that the students can understand that every part of the text is purposeful.
I also identified, I did not label for the for or against the claim. I did identify the claim, but I didn't label if it was for or against.
Okay, I think the reason that was there is, the reason I included that part on it is because we talk about in the days before this text, key ideas, and they learn about facts. And so it actually helps, kind of goes into the part of the counterclaim because it talks about this is something that's actually against, or you may be against it. So the author basically counters that argument to strengthen his own argument.
And for me, I highlighted the bridging the sentences, may identify the problem because students need to know that that's where they're looking inside the introduction to hopefully show that the central idea and the claim is there as well. And I didn't label the central idea, but I should have, because I didn't highlight that in my model. So I need to go back and make sure I put that and label it there.
Yeah, I think it's good for those too, because if you notice here, I broke it up into like introduction, body, and conclusion, because we want the students to see informational text and persuasive text that way. And if they understand what an introduction has, when we talk about like academic vocabulary understanding, you need to find first the topic. You need to then see what is the hook. Sometimes that can be the author may write one paragraph and it has all three of these components. Sometimes the author may write 3 different paragraphs where each section is its own component. So if the students are able to identify in this introduction which each section is, then they can be able to further understand what the central idea is of the text and not be lost. Because, you know, some texts, it'll have a starting off with a story and the students get stuck on the story, not recognizing that's not the central idea, that's a hook. Why is he talking about this story? So you want to make sure that the students understand how the introduction is structured. Ms. Wright?
Okay, so can you guys please identify your academic vocabulary words?
So some of the vocabulary that we have is embedded in the no-show chart. We have a central idea or claim. We also have a counter-argument or counterclaim.
Okay. Have you identified any misconceptions?
One of the misconceptions could be that the students thinking that a counter-argument would not be within the text because it doesn't change the author, but the author is stating what someone who would say against their argument or their claim.
Okay. So how will you present it to your students? Have you looked at your lesson that you need to present? Are you ready to role play?
Yes,
Can we look at the annotations? So let's look at the annotations first, just to make sure that, because we've said this is what we know and we want to show, let's see if in our own annotations we've actually shown these different text or types. So this is one that we have, and I want us to look at it and look at your annotations and decide, you know, if there's something that you would change or add to enhance it, or any clarifications that you would use.
Well, something I noticed that I didn't use is where it has title and there's connection. And then she makes the connection to what she's going to read and the title itself. I like that idea, and making sure that they know that there's a connection to the title and what they're about to read.
Yeah, I like that too. And I think I would add, even beside that, if we start to like code, so if the kids say CI or central idea, they know that they pulled the central idea of the text.
Okay.
Also on my annotations, I have on every subheading, I have a little 3 to 5 words on what that paragraph is going to be about, what that section will be talking about.
Yeah, so instead of just putting subheading here, we kind of identify either a little snippet of what is, she has to get like why support is needed. So it kind of covers the topic. So if you want to have the kids label subheading, but they still have to come back and give some type of topic of what this section is about. And did we all have the annotations as far as for each section, the key idea for each section?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Allen, were you going to say something?
Yes, about the topic, the sentence that's underlined, instead of topic, we can go ahead and use our academic vocabulary and utilize the word claim.
Okay. I think something that I would also add is I had on mine this sentence right here. I actually had that as part of, my line got crazy, but part of the the claim as well, or the central idea, he starts to introduce it there, and I think both of those are connected. One thing that you might want to do in your annotations, and of course this is preference, but because we talk about the structure of the text, introduction, body, and conclusion, I sometimes have the students to put out beside this part here that it is the introduction, and at the end on this part, I would have them to write the conclusion, because it helps them to understand, and it helps me to see that they understand that in a conclusion, the central idea is going to be restated. And we know that if it's a persuasive text or an argumentative text, that the conclusion is also going to have a call to action, which makes sense of why this subheading is "Let's be the world leaders." It's a call to action.
Mhm.
I also like the gears because it lets the students know that they're going to talk about something different. Still falls under the umbrella of the topic, but it's another point to the claim.
Yes. Did anybody else box in vocabulary words?
I used the space outside to make notes on what I thought the meaning of the vocabulary words were.
Okay. I also like how we have the images and the photos identified, but not just the photo itself. It tells us something about it, because if you notice in these particular images, there's no caption. So it's important that the students understand why these photos have been added to the text. And what would that fall under as far as instruction or standards wise? Explaining why photos are included.
That would still be the author's purpose.
Author's purpose. So when we go into author's purpose, these types of things would need to be addressed. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Ms. Davis, are you ready to role play?
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm putting up the actual PowerPoint slide for that. So we know that on this day.
Okay, so on this day, we will be focusing on, students will be focused on how to recognize the central idea and the supporting evidence. The success criteria will be that they can use text features to determine the central idea, they can recognize the central idea, and they can use details from the text to support the central idea.
And then of course, that's your central idea chart that you would have with the class. Okay.
I would share the central idea chart with the class. So we would make sure that when we're looking at the central idea, we would look for the text clues, and then we would evaluate the details. And that's going to give us our central idea. So making sure those details support the central idea that we've discovered. So when looking at our text, we're going to be looking at the introduction, or we're gonna start with the title, and the title is going to help us a lot because we know that our title, we can make connections to what we're going to read within the text. So if we're looking at our informational text anchor chart, you can see that it's broken up in how an informational text is divided. We have the introduction, we have the body, and we have the conclusion. So we're going to focus on the introduction. So let's look at our title. Our title says government must fund inventors. Well, let's think about our title and what words jump out at us. So the first thing that jumps out at me is the word fund. Well, I know fund means to support with money or give money. So then I think about who is going to be funding. Well, the government is the one that must fund. And who are they funding? They're funding the inventors. So we know that our text is going to be about the government giving money to inventors. So now let's look at the fact that our introduction is going to have some parts to it. We know that our introduction is going to have a hook. That's the thing that's going to draw us in as the reader. So let's begin by reading the text. the introduction, I apologize. Every year, our government collects trillions of dollars in taxes. Most of the funds pay for programs that keep citizens safe and healthy. Other amounts fund programs such as public education. Some of the money goes to run the government itself. It's expensive to keep our country running. Sadly, just a small percentage goes to fund innovations and interventions. In recent years, the government has spent only a small percentage of the federal budget on scientific and medical research. This is not right. The federal government must spend more money to support inventors and their work. Inventions is crucial to economic and social well-being of our country. Funding inventors improves people's lives, creates jobs, and helps our nation excel as leaders in science and technology. So the first thing I want to do is I want to look for my hook in my first paragraph. So in my first paragraph, I want to say that my hook is going to be that some of the money that, our hook is going to be most of the funds pay for programs that help keep citizens safe and healthy. So I know that that's what's hooking the reader, because we want to talk about what's going to get them to give the inventors money. They're going to provide things for us to be safe and healthy. The next thing I want to look at is I want to see if I can find my central idea, what the rest of my text is going to be about. So if I look at paragraph 2, I see that my central idea is stated. The federal government must spend more money to support inventors and their work. So my author is making a claim, or he's stating his central idea, that the government must fund more inventors so that we can have to help the public be safe and healthy. Now I know that once I start reading through my text, when I start looking at the body and the conclusion, I am now looking for key ideas that are going to help me support my claim or my central idea.
I like that. I think that what I would add to it, because we know that in the introduction, even though in here it has the hooks a reader and includes the central idea, I also know that it tends to have, so if I look at this part, it says sadly just a small percentage of goes to fund innovation and inventions. I think that's also starting to set up the argument. So that's that background information of why it's there. But what I was going to also include is when he talks about funding inventors improves people's lives, create jobs, helps our nation, he gives examples. So I would think that if we were going to write a full central idea statement, that we might say the federal government must spend money to support inventors and their work because inventors improve lives, creates jobs, and help our nation. So that is the full central idea. So each section then is probably broken down to show how they improve the lives, create the job, and help our nation.
Okay.
Yeah. So we know that we don't just end with the central idea, as we've talked about with our genre. We also have to go into author's purpose. So Ms. Rojas, would you, and I'm going to set up just a little bit your slide, would you go through and help us to understand that part? Just 1 second though. Let me move out of that. And I want you to go through the day of what the author's purpose lesson would look like.
Yes. That's the Friday.
Yes. And let me share that. Okay.
So for today's learning goal, we are going to analyze the text and explain the author's purpose and message in the text. We are going to demonstrate this by evaluating the author's message in the text and writing a response. So first of all, author's purpose, that every part of the text is purposeful, is there for a reason. So now as I think, I want you to listen for the steps, and I want you to help me analyze the author's purpose. So for the first part, what is the topic of this passage? Funding investors. So it appears to be an informational text. Then we go to the message or the idea that the author is expressing. The government must invest in inventors because they make our country strong. We need investors. Then step 3, what is the purpose? What is the author's purpose for writing this text? So then I notice that the author's message is an opinion. I know that informational texts don't give opinions. The author is writing the text to persuade the reader to believe that the government must fund inventors in order to keep our country strong. If you notice the last paragraph, let's be world leaders. That one is a call to action that inventors improve the lives, they make our country strong and prosperous. Our government must continue to invest in inventors and their innovations.
I think what I might would, were you still working on it? I'm so sorry. Okay, so I think what I might would add to that is really getting them to understand, because I like how you talked about informational texts don't include opinions. So I think maybe that's something that you might want to hone in on. I noticed that the author said the federal government must spend money. That's not a characteristic of an informational text. An informational text would not say what the government must do. That's an opinion. So that lets me know that there is some persuasion here. Let's look at other parts to see, you know, what else is here. So I noticed there is a photograph. When we're looking at author's purpose, we want to make sure that we look at every single section and everything that's included in the text and why it's there. If the author is trying to persuade us that the government must fund it, how is he doing that? Well, let's look in this sentence. It says that the funding inventors improves people's lives, create jobs, and helps our nation. So this is his reasoning of why he thinks that the government must fund the inventors. So when we think about the author's purpose, he's writing this to persuade the readers to believe that the government must fund inventors because they are essential, basically, to our lives. Now let's look at the next section. So that's what I think when you really focus in on the lesson, really make sure to help the students understand what they're looking for as far as author's purpose for the central idea, the entire genre itself or the text, but also understanding that each section has a purpose and setting it up for them to know, all right, I look at this money right here. I believe that the author included this money because it's talking about funds. And as we learned yesterday, funds deal with money. I see here that he has some type of invention. The invention that I see is a cell phone, headphones. So this picture is to kind of support how we use inventions every day. So really take the text and help show them before you release them to start to go through different sections and understand what the purpose for that section is as well. I know that we had mentioned the last paragraph, and I think that's important because you want them, or even not the last paragraph, the one before where it talks about even failures help inventors learn. You might even want to talk to them as you get to that section. I want you to really think about why has the author included this section? And as we go through it, you'll learn more about what he's done as we talk about counterclaims.
Okay, so the feedback that I would make for the suggestion for both of you guys is make sure that your max is 10 minutes for your I do. And also make sure you clearly state the skill, the learning objective throughout the model so the kids will have that on their mind. And make sure that you can explain and the kids can explain the steps of how you find the central idea and the author's purpose. Do you have any questions? Okay, I need to make sure that you do have your questions that are aligned with the STAR questions. Okay, if not, my suggestion is go to a 2018 question number 37, flying lesson of a big bird. There is a good question there. Also, I look forward to logging on to your Zoom lesson next week.
I look
Thank
forward to
you.
seeing y'all. If y'all need any help, let me know.
Yes,
Thank you.
and make sure you include that joy factor.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Have a good one.